Hi, I'm Otto Penzler. I'm at the Mysterious Bookshop in New York in the Tribeca section, and we're talking about collecting mystery fiction. And today is one of the more interesting writers in the field, Robert van Gulik. Robert van Gulik was Dutch and quite a scholar. Got his PhD in literature and became an important official, a government official, in several capacities. He served in World War II. He was captured by the Japanese and put into an internment camp, and then was released when there was an exchange of government officials. He started writing. He wrote some very scholarly works about the Chinese lute and Chinese erotic painting, Japanese erotic paintings, and so on. But he's really known today, most famous today, for having created a character called Judge D, who appears in almost all of his books. Judge D is based on a real life character, a Chinese magistrate of the 7th century, the Tang dynasty in the 7th century, who was a real life character who brought a different kind of way of administering law. He would actually think about the crime and try to find clues at a time where most judges, most criminal proceedings in China were based on torture. If you were accused of a crime, a serious crime, the general practice, instead of arguing in a court of law, was to torture the accused, and it was pretty brutal and general, and it is not uncommon for somebody to prove his innocence by dying from torture. The very first book was called the very first book that about Judge D that Van Gulik wrote. He self-published. He had found a manuscript that was from the 18th or 17th century in Chinese, and he translated it and self-published it as Di Gung An, and it was a beautiful, beautiful production. Unfortunately, I don't have one. It's a very expensive book and quite a scarce book now. It first became published in America in paperback by Dover. And here's a very modest rendering of the original painting, which was done on rice paper with multicolors and so on. And you can see that the accused here is being tortured, which is pretty creepy cover. But Judge D really tried to bring reason and logic and deduction into the solving of crimes. Most of the books involved, and this is unusual, it involved 3 cases at the same time, and they were intertwined. And then Judge D would untangle them and come up with a reasoned solution. We're talking about Judge D, but I'll show you another book. This is very rare. The Given Day. This is not a Judge D story, but this was self-published by Van Gulik in Kuala Lumpur at the Art Printing Works in 1964. That's $350. It's a very, very scarce book. And here's a Dutch edition of one of his books. It looks like it's 4 fingers because it's close enough to a language that I know, which Dutch is not one of those. The books mainly appeared first, apart from the ones that he self-published. He published 3 Judge D novels in Kuala Lumpur also, because he was often stationed in Asia as a diplomat of some kind, various titles, mostly in Japan, but other places as well, including Malaysia, and he published some books there. Those books then were published in England, at first by Michael Joseph. And if you remember, if you've been watching this, the series of talks long enough, Michael Joseph was not a very large publisher, but a successful one, and they published all of Dick Francis. And there's the title page, and the nice thing about Michael Joseph, you could always tell a first edition on the copyright page, because they didn't have anything contrary to it being a first edition. And if they did a second printing, they would say second printing. And the British editions are very handsome. They're in a nice compact format, handsome, elegant covers, as you can see. That's another Michael Joseph. So is that, the Chinese Bell Murders. And again, and these are about $150, $200 each, because they're in beautiful condition. Again, if you look on the copyright page, you can see it's very clear that there's no second printing, and this is what they all look like. Eventually, he moved to Heinemann, a larger house, and Heinemann also used a very similar methodology of showing first published with a date, and if they had a second printing, they would say second printing, taking all the element of risk and lack of insurance out of the formula. But again, look at these really handsome covers. Even though he changed publishers, you almost can't tell the difference. He wrote Phantom of the Temple. I particularly like that cover. He wrote a bibliomystery, which is Poets and Murder, and we'll get to that. He also wrote a locked room mystery and the Chinese Maze Murders. I don't have a copy of that. Generally, a year later, or maybe sometimes in the same year, he was published in America by Scribner. And Scribner, who we've talked about before, had a method of showing their first printing by putting an A on the copyright page. And if there's no A, even though everything else looks right, it's not a first edition. In the more recent years, I'm going to say 2000 or even 1990, they abandoned the A on the copyright page and used a number sequence like so many other publishers did. But here are some of the American editions. They were mostly all done. The first several were done by Harper. Chinese Gold Murders, Chinese Maze Murders also, and Chinese Bell Murders were done by Harper. And Harper also would say second printing on their books if there was a second printing. And after 3 books with Harper, he moved to Scribner on a regular basis. They're beautiful books. They're affordable, mostly, although Di Gung An is in the very first book is in the thousands. And it's a hard collection to finish, but a really nice collection that's modest in number, fewer than 20 books, and they're lovely books. So thank you very much.